And we're live. Awesome. Kia ora, everybody. I believe we're live now. So, Ibrahim, over to you. You're just muted, so I think you'll just need to unmute.
Thank you, Ricardo. It's been a long day. Apology about that. Kia ora koutou na mihi nui kia koutou katoa. Salam alaikum. I think this is the third session, basically. The one that you did at the beginning, Ricardo. So this is the series of webinars that we've been running in the last few days and weeks in regard to the migrant exploitation inquiry, which the submission now is open, and the deadline is the 3rd of February 2022, which is next week. So we can't emphasize enough the importance of people submitting and telling the committee the changes that they wanted to see, and also basically recommendations as well. So, but before we go into other details, Ricardo, can you kick off this with whakatahi, please?
Kia ora, Ibrahim, and kia ora to those of you who are joining via Zoom and Facebook. I'll kick us off with this whakatoki, which goes, E hara taku toa I te toa takitahi, Enari he toa takitini ke, which roughly translates to, my strength does not come from me alone, but from many. And I think that is a good theme to start off our workshop on the inquiry.
Awesome. Thank you, Ricardo. So I'll just go and talk a little bit about the background of this inquiry. This inquiry was launched by the Education and Workforce Select Committee, which I'm part of, and Ricardo often come in and fill in for some of his colleagues as well. So the inquiry is it's a timely inquiry, and while we know that New Zealand it's all about fairness, it's all about equity, it's all about equality, but we've got issues with migrant exploitation, and it's been going on for far long. I don't know the exact time, but this had started. But what I can say is that it's going on as we speak, and it's about time that this had stopped. So there is a lot of work underway. There is a work by the government that's underway. There is already things have been put in place to help stop this, but also other piece of work is going to be needed to deal with this. Part of this is what we're doing now. So it's really important for the committee to hear from the public, especially for people that have been affected by this directly. I know that we've seen a lot of story in the media and social media about the awful treatment, the way that people have been treated, the way that they still are continue to be treated and exploited. So if this is going to stop, and then we all need to join hands, and then we all need to be doing our bit. Otherwise, complaining about it, knowing that it exists and not doing anything about it is not an answer. It's not a solution. So migrant exploitation has happened everywhere, and this is many forms and shapes, and sometimes things that you face every day. They might seem very little things to you, but in fact, you're being exploited. It's migrant exploitation happened for too many reasons. One of the things that I would say is first and foremost, I think it's just agreed by some of the employers, but it's also because people who are being exploited are vulnerable, because they don't know their rights, they don't know the rules, they don't know the employment law. I've said this many times. When I first came, I didn't know anything about the rules in New Zealand. Where I came from, you cannot even look at your boss, let alone to challenge them. It's a taboo. So that just a place that it's something that's stuck with you for a long time, and it takes time for that mindset to change. And when I first came, I didn't know my right. I was just so grateful that I had a cleaning job, and I know how hard I have worked to get that job. So at any cost, I needed to retain that job. And there were times that I would call sick, really was bad cold, and I would told that there is no cover for me, and I need to come and the cover of work. And I would get on train all the way from Lower Hutt to Wellington Central just to so that is exploitation. If you know that you are being underpaid and your boss know and they don't care, then that is exploitation. And if you have to ask permission to go to the loo or to take a break just because of who you are, if you are being intimidated, that is exploitation. And often we know that people are underpaid. People would do 70, 80 hours. We've seen and heard the story of people like doing 70, 80 hours, but yet they only get paid for 30 or 40 hours. That's a pure exploitation, and it's evil, it's illegal. That we have a law in this country that protects everyone, whether you are New Zealand citizen, whether you are permanent resident, whether you are a migrant who's living in New Zealand temporarily, and you don't even have an intention of living in New Zealand for a long time, but still the law that exists applies to you and protects you, gives you protection. So do not let anyone tell you that because you are not New Zealand permanent resident or citizen that you are that you're not equal with others, because that's wrong. So while we have an issue, while this is a black stain in our, I think I would like to call it a clean image, but there is also hope that the work is underway to change this. And the part of this inquiry is really important, because not every committee member knows what's happening in detail. And some might know because they care and they go extra mile and researching and paying attention, but some don't. So it's important that people come and tell us whether it happened to them, whether it's happened to their mates, whether it happened to their family members and friends, and they need to come and tell us, and they need to tell the committee what kind of change they wanted to see. Myself and Ricardo are here to answer the question. And also, if you have any question around the procedure, around the process, we are here to answer your question. If you have any concerns in terms of if you are worried about your employment, about the consequence, and we are here also to answer your questions. And also, making a submission is not an easy process. It can be very intimidating. Then again, I will go back and share my own story. In 2014, when I was a select cleaner of Vic Uni, I submitted to Parliamentary Select Committee. And it's very scary. It's very intimidating. And it's very important that that you have a support person with you, whether from your job or family member or friend, that who can make sure that you are okay, to calm you down. Because I did have someone sit next to me, someone who knew the process really well, someone who knew this parliament well, and it was a great support, and I was okay. But also the committee members, sometimes even the members that don't agree that on things that you're submitting on, they might not agree with you, but they are actually respectful and they will treat you nice. If you are really worried that, well, my employer will find out and then I could lose my job, and then there are other ways to do it. You don't have to mention your name. You can be anonymous, and you can still submit. You don't have to show your face. You don't have to come in person. You can do through Zoom. If you want to, if you don't want to show your face in a Zoom, in a video, you can turn it off. And also, so look, if you have any questions, we are happy to answer your questions as they come. But at the moment, I thought this is just an introduction or the icebreaker. And next, I will give Ricardo a chance to say a few words, and then we will go straight into the question and the answer as well. Over to you, Ricardo.
Awesome. Kia ora, Ibrahim. Yeah, thank you for presenting the inquiry. I guess for those of you who may be new to Parliament and parliamentary processes, the great opportunity here is that your contributions and your voice can help government make better decisions. And so the committee is here to basically enhance the work that government is doing and help guide it by bringing your voices together. So we've got a really good historic opportunity to guide government on these issues. I guess from my perspective, as a first-generation immigrant from Mexico and having worked in the hospitality industry, like Ibrahim, I know that migrant exploitation is rife, and it's been rife since I've been in the country. And Ibrahim, I think, talked about the many layers that exploitation can look like, right? And for me, you know, one of the common themes I've observed in the community is people who are on employer-bound visas, and that kind of tends to lead on to really toxic power dynamics. So I guess my message to the community who may be listening is we really need your voice. I think also if you're watching and maybe you're not a migrant yourself, but you've worked in an environment where you've got colleagues on temporary visas, this is your time to talk with them and to contribute as well, to sort of explain maybe what you've seen in your industry. Because we know that everybody loses when migrants are exploited. So I guess on top of the sort of questions and answers that we may have, just a few sort of hat tips or quick sort of disclaimers about making a submission. You can make it anonymous. But if you feel you're concerned, on the Parliament website where you can submit, and we'll post the links in the comments, you can get in touch with parliamentary officials to basically ask them to make to present secret evidence, which just means that you'll be protected, I guess, from your contributions being in the public sphere, because we know migrants are feeling nervous about their employment or their immigration status being compromised by speaking out. And the other thing that we'll go through on top of things is just, you know, I think Ibrahim, you said it before, speak from your heart. You know, just be really open and honest about your experiences, and then things will just flow naturally. But yeah, just really keen to hear your contributions. There's no bad questions or comments on this issue, because you know, I spent most of my adult life never thinking about making a submission, and so I can only imagine for those of you who are just joining in, this must be a whole new world. If it is, probably for us too as well in many ways. So I'll just bring it back to you, Ibrahim, to keep us guiding us through the workshop.
Thanks, Ricardo. One thing I would say is that the importance of really personal stories and personal experience. People can argue against the graphs, against the data, against the reports, but no one can argue against the personalized story. It's very powerful because it's your own lived experience, and that's really, really important. So if you are the head of organization, for example, and the police encourage your members to come and tell their story. When you submit, often people worry about the amount of details that needs to be put into written submissions. You don't have to do that. You can just write a couple of lines and say to blah blah blah, to education, we're going to work for a select committee, and my name is this is my organization. I wanted to submit. I want to come face to face, or I wanted to do a submission to the committee, and then the clerks will get in touch with you once we know when the submissions are going to be heard, and then you will be invited to come in and submit. So then that's the time that when you come and say things in detail, whether it's your own story, it's your organization's members' story, or your family member But it's the bottom line is that you need to submit. You need to come and tell the committee that what change you want to see. That's the only way that we all gonna make a change. We know that this is happening. We know it's awful. It's illegal. And now what's left? What we need to do is we need to change it. We need to stop it. We need to change it. So and in regard to this, the government is committed. There is already some work that's been done in place. For example, as Ricardo mentioned, one of the reasons why people being exploited is because often their visas can be linked to the employer, to this specific employer, and that same employer is the one who could be exploiting the person. So because people don't want to lose their immigration status, they don't report, they can't live. So now that has changed. So for example, if you're being exploited and you've got to make a complaint and you've got to go through the process, you obviously have to prove it, and then you'll be allowed to leave the employer that's exploiting you. And then you've got 6 months to find a new employment. Now there is argument around whether that's time frame, 6 months time frame is enough or not. That's probably the separate discussion that we need to have. But for now, I'm just putting it out that this is this exists, and if you are being exploited, and then you've got this option, and your visa is linked to your employer, you've got this option. You can leave this employer, and then you've got 6 months to apply for a new job, and hopefully you'll be able to find a new job in this time frame. So I think I like to think that we've covered the main things that need to be mentioned. If I'm missing anything, Ricardo, please remind me. But myself and we've got some really good members of the select committee, especially from Labour and the Green sides, and we will be thrilled to see you and to talk to you. So I cannot emphasize enough the importance of the submission, is the importance of this personalized stories, the importance of the recommendations that will be coming from you. That's really, really invaluable. So come, we will like to hear from you and to tell us what kind of changes that you would like to see. Is there anything you need to add, Ricardo?
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on it at the beginning, but just to expand, like you mentioned, there is the written submission and then the oral presentation. I think really important you make it really clear. I recommend at the beginning if you're keen to make an oral submission, and I really encourage people to do so. But important to sort of put it in writing, otherwise it's it's not easy for the clerk to assume whether you do want or not. I think the other thing is, the question about like how long do you have to do it? I mean, we recommend succinct, so short submissions are best, but we understand some of you may need to put a more thorough timeline of how exploitation happened. But don't let sort of English as a second language stop you. If you feel like your grammar isn't like perfect, that's not going to impact the power of your submission. So really recommend you sort of going ahead with it, even if you feel like you're not massively confident with English. We did get a question, Ibrahim, from Ibrahim Ali, which I think just touches on what I was also going to say. So I'll just sort of, Ibrahim, I'll answer your question on top of my sort of filling in other details. You asked, after the submission, when can we expect a result or an outcome to be achieved? And I guess in terms of timelines, normally what happens is we get submissions, then those get collated by the clerks, the parliamentary sort of team that supports the committee. They'll give us a summary of how many we've received and what are the themes, like maybe how many want to present thoroughly, and then that'll take maybe a week or two, and then normally that's my experience. It could be more if we get heaps of submissions, and then we go on to start engaging with the oral submissions, and how long it takes depends on how many we end up getting, right? So of course we would love to get heaps, and the committee will always try and pack in as many as we can, and they'll work to find a time that works for you. in order to submit with us. And so what happens after we hear all the oral submissions? The clerk will then go back, create basically a report detailing what we've heard, or we may want to bring potentially officials, as well to ask them how government's been doing work on exploitation, so that there may be a process. And so it can take potentially a couple of months, sometimes more. And then what we end up with is a report that goes to Parliament. And obviously, we know the government does want to address migrant exploitation. So I guess in regards to your last part of the question in terms of an outcome to be achieved, I guess, Ibrahim, you may have a reckon on that, but my hope is that whatever we recommend gets incorporated as part of the immigration rebalance. That would be my my aspiration in terms of the work. Yeah.
I think you answered the question, Ricardo. Ibrahim, it's what's going to happen is that the committee is going to hear all the submissions, and we're going to, first and foremost, I like to assure everyone that every submission that's going to be sent to the committee, whether it's written and also oral, it's all going to be, every single written submission is going to be read. We read them all, and then on top of the people will come and submit in person. Then after that, the committee is going to make a recommendation to the House in terms of what change, what needs to happen, and that report will go to the House. So this is in terms of Ibrahim. You said that when do we the results to be achieved? If you're talking about the solution to this, and it's also already the work that has started, and the minister is working on it, and this is gonna fit into that as well. So it's not like we're starting from zero. There is already work in progress, and there is a feeling that the work that's been done so far is not enough, and more needs to be done. If that's what you think, come and tell us. Share your story and come and tell us what kind of change that you want to see. What do you want the government to do? What do you want the committee? What kind of a recommendation is that you want the committee to make to the House? These are all the things that we need to hear from you. Yeah, every story is going to help. Every recommendation is going to help.
Ibrahim, I don't know if you picked up one of the comments that came up on Facebook that's been posted here on Zoom, but we had somebody coming in and kind of saying that, they had a comment saying that basically they think that better monitoring or overseeing of employers and agencies that employ people is needed. And then they give an example that, the RSC workers could be easily checked up on, and that MB and WorkSafe need to be on the ground to check them on. Then, if somebody feels this way, would you recommend that they include that in a submission? I mean, is this the kind of comments that maybe people, if they've got reckons, you think they should be putting in?
Well, RSE workers are migrants, and that they can be included into this. Today in the symposium that I attended was the union symposium, and one of the union officials talked about the RSE. And I think that particular union is going to make a submission on their behalf as well. So in terms of the prosecution comment, well, we have seen some dodgy employers that when we have, if the employers are caught exploiting people and that the evidence is clear, they get prosecuted. It's not like they get away with it. I think you would have seen in the media, people were asked to pay like a hefty fine, or even there are people that who went to prison for exploiting migrants. But the problem have been that getting the concrete evidence have been difficult because people don't come forward, because due to fear of if you are someone who's working for a specific employer, you being exploited, you're not gonna come forward and share your story about what's happening to you, because you are worried not only about losing your job, but also about being told to go back to your own country by immigration in New Zealand. And it's because of this, and the employers know that, and they perfectly take been taking advantage of this situation. So I think that's what we need to change. We need to empower people so they can come and share stories and come forward and make complaints if they're being exploited. But so far, the employers manage to get away with it because people are too scared to. And the reason why we have been running this series of webinars is, and we know that people are afraid to come forward. So we wanted to encourage people that it's okay, that you will be protected, that you will be, but also there are other ways and the means of submitting, not only by showing your face or coming in person. So we've got employers until now being prosecuted. I know that the WorkSafe also, if they are notified, they I know that they actively investigate the incidents, but sometimes the problem, the issue have been people coming forward, and that's what we like to change.
Awesome. I think I just saw another question come through in the chat, which is about, hey, could you please elaborate on the type of work exploitation and the change or results you're looking to see? Maybe let's tackle the first one, like, elaborating on the types of work exploitation that could exist. I think you named a few in the intro, Ibrahim.
Yeah, Red, I don't know if you were in from the beginning. Migrant exploitation is, I know that you live in Auckland and you've heard a lot of awful stories where people were like, work 70, 80 hours, but they only get paid 30, 40 hours, and effectively are getting paid less than minimum wage, which is a crime in New Zealand. And the people, what often in employment sector which is overcrowded with migrants, what employers do is we've heard about stories of employers undercutting each other, contracts, for example. And so I will give you one example, the things that I have seen as a union organizer, things that I have seen with my own eyes. Employers would apply to get the contracts. Employers compete, right, for contracts, so they undercut each other. If Ricardo's doing the contract for $2 million, I would come and say I would do it for 1.8 million, and then so the same that I promise to maintain the same level of service, right? So what I do is I turn around and either cut hours from people and make sure that they overwork, and so the same level of, so I can provide the same level of service to the client. So they cut hours, sometimes they cut people off, and then they overwork them, and this is exploitation. And often, just because you don't know, sometimes if you are a migrant or if you are a new refugee to this country, employers know that, and sometimes by law, if you're working 8 hours, for example, you're supposed to have like 1 hour, half an hour lunch break, and 2 small courses of 15 minutes, or often it can be 20 minutes. And if you are denying one of this, that's exploitation. So exploitation can happen in so many ways, but the extreme stories that we have seen and heard is that people like doing 80, 90 hours and only get paid, for 30, 40 hours or even less, or even effectively get paid like $14, $15 per hour, even though the minimum wage is 20, for example. All these are types of migrant exploitation, but there are things that we don't hear about as well. There could be ways that people are being exploited we might not know, and that's why the importance of this inquiry is to bring this kind of stories into the light and to tell New Zealand public that this is what's happening, because everyone is sick and tired of hearing it is a liability. It's bad for our economy. It's bad for people. It traumatizes people and families, and it's bad for our economy as well. But moreover, it's bad for our reputation as a country with a beautiful history of equality, equity, and like fairness as well.
I think the other sort of, to elaborate on that, an example that may not often be thought of as exploitation by some migrants, but, it really is that sort of pervasive agreement that people end up getting into with their employers when they're on a pathway to residency that maybe requires them to be earning a certain amount of money or working a certain number of hours, or sort of, a certain amount of money per hour. People often end up getting in agreements where, they'll report that their weekly, hours are, say, 30, when in reality they're made to work way more hours. And then it's like an arrangement where the employer and the worker end up presenting a different type of thing to immigration that makes it look like the worker's actually earning, I don't know, say $27 an hour, when they're actually in reality working twice as much for half the pay. And sometimes for some migrants at first, this may be like an agreement that they may willfully go into because it may be your one pathway to residency, but the truth is that ends up driving down working conditions for yourself. If things go wrong, it's a lot harder to then negotiate things with your employer, and it does drive working conditions for other people in the same industry too. So if you've been in that situation, I would deem that as a type of exploitation, and it would be great to hear if you've ever been, in a situation where you felt like your employer tried to negotiate an arrangement like that with you. In terms of the change of results that we're looking to see, well, I think we've talked about cracking down on employers, and in my case, I'm really encouraged by the growing number of voices talking about those coupled visas to single employers. But equally, we've heard from unions. Ibrahim, I'm sure you can talk about that, I guess, about the resourcing to the Labour Inspectorate and the agencies that are tasked to crack down on exploitation. Just the fact that they just need more resourcing, and that's one of the feedback we've heard. And so hopefully that'll come through as part of the inquiry. I don't know, Ibrahim, if you got any reckons on that.
You are right. Look, there's always a need for more resources to be able to do this job properly. I know that so far the labor inspectors have been some good work have been done in that space, but we've heard also a lot of stories about more resources being given to them so they can be able to effectively investigate and also prosecute people as well. So it's gonna take a whole lot of a piece of work to to stop the migrant exploitation. I see our select committee chair Maya Lubeck in attendance. Welcome, Maya, and moreover, welcome back to Aotearoa. If you wanted to say a few words, please feel free to jump in.
We may need some technical support if she's keen to jump in.
I mean, bring her in. She might not. She might not want to say anything about it. Just in case if she wants to.
For those joining in, Maria is, like Ibrahim said, the chair of the committee and has been a strong ally. I've had the privilege to work with Maria to receive petitions on pathways to residency. So yeah, really nice to have you here. Actually, I see that you've put a question, Maria, in the Q&A section. Great leading question for us. Maria is asking, how important is it that you do a full submission by the deadline of 3rd of February, or is it okay to do a few lines and then do a fuller one by oral submission? We did touch on this a little bit at the beginning, Maria, which Ibrahim was saying, it is okay to do a full, a very brief submission, then, I'm saying that you can then expand when you do an oral submission. I think just more broadly, I just don't want people to feel intimidated that the only way to do a submission is to do a massive essay, right? I think if you've got thoughts about what needs to change, especially if you've gone through exploitation or you're a migrant and see your colleagues, let us know. And then you can expand on that later down the track. Some people I know feel really compelled to write down, like I said at the beginning, a whole timeline of their time in Aotearoa, and if you got the time and resources, go hundies, we love to see it. But the truth is that if we get hundreds of submissions, we want to make sure that it's really clear to us, what you think needs to change. And the oral submission is a great opportunity. Just Ibrahim, while I'm speaking to that, I guess normally the standard is individuals tend to get around 5 minutes to do an oral presentation. And my advice is, if you're feeling nervous about an oral submission, write it down, have a support person. You can do them by Zoom. So you can have somebody next to you in the Zoom to support you. If English isn't your first language, you can have somebody who is proficient in your native language and in English, and then they can sort of help make sure that you get things across in the best way possible. And ultimately, I recommend leaving a couple of minutes for questions and answers with the MPs, which is always a beautiful thing to have, because it's where I often found the most important exchanges happen.
The most important thing that I to talk about that, Ricardo, what you said at the beginning, that people often put off because they think that they have to write like an essay to submit. Look, submission is all about making your point and sharing your own story. So far, for the last 12 months, sitting in the committee, the most powerful thing that I have seen is listening to people's stories, personal stories. It's really, 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 really valuable. It's very powerful. So you don't have to write everything. You don't have to write an essay. You can just write few lines, submit that, but you can tell that I want to come and submit in person. That's the most important thing. I know that today, talking to a lot of unions, that a lot of unions are gearing up to submit, or already maybe they might have sent their submissions already. But I would just go back and make a point that I make at the beginning, that I cannot emphasize enough that if you know people, if you know friends, if you know other organizations that they might not come across this, the webinars that we have been running in the last few weeks, please let them know that this is open. The opportunity is open until next Thursday, the 3rd of February 2022. Because, like I said before, this is entirely becoming like a chronic disease, and we're hearing the stories of people basically unfairly being exploited, because some sick-minded employers just want more money but I also wanted to make really one point clear here, that we are talking about exploitation and employers, this and that, but employers that who exploit people here are very tiny minority. They are not a reflection of our general employers here in New Zealand. The vast majority of employers comply. They treat their employees with respect and dignity. So please bear in mind that these are quite few employers. Like, there is always a bad apple. Other than that, we've got some like exemplary employers that treat their employees with respect and dignity. I have seen both. I have seen employers that who openly happy to exploit people, but I have also seen employers who go extra miles to look after their employees, to treat them with respect and dignity. They just thought that it's not all a bad news.
One migrant being exploited, of course, is one too many, which is why we're taking action to ensure that we do our best to eradicate it. I just saw a question popping in just above the Mario one. I'll just pick it up if that's okay, because it's about, maybe actually, Ibrahim, you may know. So it's when the employers go for accreditation for the accredited employer work visa, will the government get entire information about migrant exploitation in that organization?
I'm not 100% sure, but I assume that's the case. I have no reason to believe that it's otherwise. But I think it's from Sonia, right? Sonia, look, my feeling is that this is the case, but I'm more than happy to double check this and get back to you. But I mean, everything the government has done so far in regards to migrant exploitation is it's an MB website, and it's out there, and it's available for all employers. But let me double check and get back to you, just for peace of mind.
Yeah, my understanding is more that I guess there will be checks if there's been, you know, prior investigations, etc. And so that's kind of part of the accreditation program. That's my understanding. I think for those of you who, you know, have seen this move towards an accredited employer system, I guess what could be useful is, you know, I think it would be interesting to hear like how you feel this may support you, or how, or if you think more is needed, you know, like what you think needs to happen. So I do recommend those of you who have thought it's like, well, it could be really useful if my employer was accredited and government actually knew which employers have a good track record. Maybe do go, like Ibrahim said, to the MB website, check it out, have a read, and then that may actually give you some ideas about, you know, what is missing, if anything. You know, how can we ensure that the, you know, the current efforts to address exploitation and genuinely do that, you know, to your expectations. So yeah, do let us know what you reckon of the current accreditation system that is being planned for the future. Ibrahim, I know you mentioned you had a story that you know, from your experience in exploitation. I felt like I heard it a few times, but I quite like it. I just thought could be good, while other people hopefully give us some questions to answer in the next.
I mean, the reality is exploitation can happen to anyone, whether you are a migrant who you were temporarily here in New Zealand, you could be a former refugee that who are already a permanent resident, or even a citizen. Even after I became an MP now, people often come to me with stories. And to me, what happened to me was I was working as a cleaner in one of the dirtiest hostels, and often we would work 12 to 13 hours a day. And this is my first ever employment, by the way, probably about 3-4 months after I came to New Zealand. So I was entirely fresh. I had no idea about New Zealand law, and I had this supervisor who was acting like my friend, but he's always like, he was an eye for the boss. So one day I had really bad flu, and I called in the morning, 7 a.m. like, hey, I'm really sick, I can't come today. And he hung up, and then he got back to me and said, well, there is no one to cover for you, so you have to come. This is like, he can tell that how like I really sounded sick, but he didn't care. So to me, the job was more important, because at the time there was the international economic crisis, and it was hard to get a job. And I got a job out of about maybe 24 people. So to me, it felt like I won $1 million lotto. So I didn't want to let it go. So I went to and I worked from, I think I got there about 10:30, and I worked all the way until 8 p.m. So that is exploitation. That's the classic example of exploitation. If this person knew that I knew my rights, he wouldn't have done that to me. He wouldn't do it to others. So so there is I've got one other story, and in this particular employment, I had enough. I left, but I think about 2.5 years later, I left, and then they told me to goodbye, because I've never had any annual leave, and all my annual leave was accumulated. They didn't pay me out. They just went quiet. So I started my other job at Big Uni, and that's when I first got to be introduced to the unions. My union organizer came, and we had a quick catch up with him, and I've told him my story, my experience with my previous employer, and he said, well, good on you for leaving. That sounds awful. They might have paid you out good though, because 2.5 years you never had any. I told him, what do you mean? He said, well, if you don't use your annual leave, you accumulate it, and then the day that you leave, they pay you out. And I told him, not even a penny. So you see, I didn't know this. And then we called the employer and the boss, and he said, Where are you? I have been looking for you. So he basically pretended that he was looking for me. He wasn't. He was gonna be quiet, and he was gonna get away with it. So these are the classic examples of exploitation can really happen, not just to recently arrived migrants, but also even a former refugee. It does happen to New Zealanders who are born and raised here as well. So it just really depends into the employer, the circumstance, the environment. Yeah, but we also have, Ricardo, you mentioned it the other day, we have a lot of migrant employers who are exploiting other migrants as well. So it's really, there is no one way to this practice. It does take many shapes, many forms. It can happen by anyone to anyone. Yeah, so that's my story, if you can relate to it. But and the reality is that it can happen to anyone. And I have submitted on behalf of my colleagues about 100+ cleaners when I was a VQUNI student. It's very scary to come to Parliament to sit down face-to-face with members of select committee and submit. It can be very scary experience. And if you are feeling anxious, scared, it's okay. I felt it that when I first submitted, but I had my union comrades next to me. They encouraged me, they helped me to write my submission, they helped me to frame my story, and they came with me, and he was sitting next to me. I bought me a coffee. He made me feel so comfortable. But the committee members were even better. They were nice, they were respectful. Even the other, like the national members of the select committee who didn't agree with what I was saying, they were really respectful. They made me feel welcome. They made me feel home. They treated me with respect and dignity. So if you come to our select committee, we've got our awesome chair here, Maya Lubeck, and she's gonna lead it. I can tell you she's a champ. She will look after you, and we're all gonna make you comfortable.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point. I mean, that the oral submission is not like, you know, it's this, the idea of the space is that, you know, us MPs, we want to actually unpack, you know, everything you've got to contribute. So people like Ibrahim and I, you know, and Mari and others who, you know, if you come to us and you get nervous, you know, we're there to actually then do questions to help you sort of continue on with your contributions, right? So we're there to support you to make the strongest submission that you can. And we're not really there to, well, I mean, I think I can only speak for the three of us all probably, but we're not there, and the other Labour colleagues won't be there to antagonize you on this, right? We're there to ensure that by the time we get a report, it's really sort of coming off the back of everything you've said, because ultimately the report will be your voices. It won't be so much, I mean, we'll have a contribution, and we may have, you know, different parties may end up giving their own views about what they think on the issue, but ultimately it's going to predominantly be about what you say. So it's really in your hands to ensure that Parliament gives, or the committee gives, a strong recommendation to government. We're kind of getting close to 8 o'clock, and Ibrahim, I don't see any new questions coming up, but is there any questions that you remember from the previous sessions that you were like, oh, that was a really good question, like, you know, that you may want to sort of let those people listening know?
Yeah, no, I mean, no particularly, but I think the other day someone mentioned it, that we even encouraged the person to come and tell the committee that he was, well, obviously people are afraid of if they come and submit, if their name is going to be on the list, and they might there might be consequences to their immigration status. You shouldn't worry about that. If you got story, come and submit. And then if there is, if something goes wrong after that because of you submit, you appeared in the video, or you came in person, and we will follow that up. But I encourage you to come and submit. I don't want the fear that you have for your immigration status, which is legitimate, to be an issue for you, because this is the reason why this practice has been going on for a long time. People are worried for their employment, for their immigration status. So that should not be the case anymore. And the people should be feeling comfortable to come and tell us. I think, I don't know, I forgot the exact story, but someone said that I think after, yeah, so this was the person that he said that because he was exploited by a previous employer, and then he was allowed to leave under the new rule. And he had 6 months to find another employment. And then he said he couldn't get a job, and he was asked to leave New Zealand. I encouraged him to come and share the story. Come and tell us that if that's your experience, and come and tell us whatever happened to you, whether you were underpaid, whether you were overworked, whether you are bullied, whether you are mistreated. We would like to hear from you. So in the next few days between now and the 3rd of February, we will be putting constant social media messages to remind you that the submission is still open, but also you can help us by spreading the word around, telling your colleagues, and if you are from organization that you might have other sister organizations, tell them, just help us to spread the word to make sure that we're getting as many submissions as possible.
Awesome. Well, I think that's the sort of, oh, I see one last comment on the Facebook, so we can maybe close that off. And if you want, I can close this off with a whakatauki after Ibrahim, just to sort of, yeah, clear the space. But I see a comment on the Facebook feed that reads, or I'm just reading it off my phone. So this person kind of says, look, it's kind of sort of alluding to, they're not sure if it's migrant exploitation, but he was talking about, so this is Ishtiak Firdaus, who says, if we're not allowed back to the country after having a valid visa, we are being without any earnings for 2 years now. As a migrant worker, I feel we are being mistreated and neglected by the entire establishment. So yeah, aroha mai, that this is kind of where you're at and how you're feeling. And I guess the space around exploitation, if you feel like this is a type of exploitation, I mean, it's important that you feel like your contributions are valid. And ultimately, you know, the whole point of having the open democracy that we have is that you can have your say, right? And so I encourage people to make their contributions. And sometimes, yeah, us MPs may get challenged by the community, and that's kind of the whole point of the committee space, right? We don't just hear things that may be nice. Sometimes some of the things we hear may be challenging.
I mean, one comment I would add to that is, Ricardo, we acknowledge these stories, and you know, it's difficult. It's heartbreaking to see that people have been locked out, and out of maybe sometimes even from their property or friends and families. After paying a lot of money, we hear these stories and we acknowledge. And the reality is that this is the reality being created by COVID-19. So far, it was beyond everyone's control. We have the only way New Zealand has done so well so far with COVID-19 is because we closed our borders. Now, no one wanted to close the borders and keep people out. We've got even New Zealanders who are struggling to come back because of the limited space in MIQ. So, and I hope that I tell this person that I hope that he would have seen that our reconnecting plan, and tell him that to keep an eye for that, and hopefully as it's planned that our border is going to be wide open by April. Now with Omicron environment and things might have changed a little bit, but so far cabinet and government hasn't made any decisions, and so far it's set to open in planned times. But I just wanted to reiterate when I say that our sincere sympathy and solidarity with these people, but please do understand that this is a situation that's been created, reality that's been created by COVID-19, and so far it's been beyond. We have saved lives, and we have been praised for things that we have done. Now, the things that we have done might not be popular with everyone, but the vast majority of New Zealanders are in support of the measures the government has been taking so far and continues. So hopefully in the next few weeks and months, things might change, things, the borders might open, and hopefully he will be able to come back.
Kia ora. And we just had a final comment saying, Dave, thank you for our guidance, and that just from Manu that he's made a submission. So that's really nice to hear, Manu. I think that's a perfect sort of thing to just close it off. I mean, would you like me to just do a whakatauki, or do you have any other closing remarks, Ibrahim?
No, I just want to say for everyone who's with us here tonight, and thank you so much for being with us. We know that you all might have had a busy day, but you have decided to join us, and thank you so much for sticking around. And then again, my last comment would be, please spread the word. If you haven't submitted so far, please make your submissions, and we would love to hear from you, and looking forward to see you in our select committee. Under current environment, submissions might be via Zoom, but who knows? So all I can say is thank you so much for joining us, and over to you, Ricardo.
Kia ora, yeah, and share the inquiry link on any Facebook groups, community Facebook groups that you're part of, because that will help people know that this is happening. Just to close this off with a whakatauki, waiho i te toipoto, kawa i te toiroa, which stands for let us keep close together, not far apart. And that is very important for our migrant community right now, more than ever. So kia ora, Ibrahim, for facilitating, and hopefully we'll be seeing some of you in the committee.
Thanks, Ricardo, and thank you to Sean for the good work that he's been doing facilitating all this. Thank you for your hard work, Sean, and also Jack, who's not here tonight, who's been supporting me from behind, from the background, from behind. He's Maya and the Camilla's EA. He's been a great supporter. Thank you, Jack, if you're listening to us. Otherwise, have all a good evening. I'll see you soon. Kia ora.